Eli had always loved the quiet solitude of his mountain cabin. Nestled among towering pines, it was his sanctuary, far from the noise of the city and the relentless demands of everyday life. For years, he had poured sweat and soul into restoring the weathered wood, fixing the stone chimney, and planting wildflowers along the creek. This place was more than a home. It was a testament to his stubborn spirit and love for nature. That calm morning started like any other. The sun slipped gently over the ridge, painting golden streaks across the forest floor. Birds called out, and the crisp scent of pine filled the air. Eli stepped outside, sipping his coffee, savoring the peace. Then the knock came, sharp, insistent, at his front door. He wasn't expecting visitors. The sound echoed oddly in the quiet, too formal, too urgent. Setting down his cup, Eli opened the door. A man in a dark suit stood on his porch, expression unreadable. He held a thick, official-looking envelope, stamped with the HOA's emblem, a gold crest that, until now, had meant nothing to Eli, except boring rules and fines for minor landscaping infractions. "I'm here to deliver a notice from the HOA," the man said, his voice cold, clipped. Without waiting for an invitation, he handed over the envelope and turned away without another word. Eli closed the door, heart pounding, and stared at the envelope as if it might explode. The letters HOA had never felt threatening before. Now, they sent a chill down his spine. He tore the seal. Inside, crisp paper bore a typed message in harsh, bureaucratic language. "Dear homeowner, it has come to the board's attention that your cabin is in violation of multiple covenants and must be removed within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in immediate demolition at your expense. This decision is final and non-negotiable." Eli's eye, breath caught. Removed, demolished. The words blurred as his mind raced. Why? Why now? He flipped through the rest of the letter, searching for specifics. None. No explanation. No clear violation cited. Only the cold, final order. The clock had started ticking. A sudden wave of fear crashed over him. This wasn't just a notice. It was a warning. Something bigger was at play. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules. They were targeting him. But why? Eli's thoughts spiraled. Could it be the new HOA board president, that ruthless woman who had taken office months ago? He'd heard whispers that she was eager to push through plans that would profit a few insiders at the community's expense. Was his cabin in the way? A flicker of resolve replaced his fear. Eli wasn't about to let this happen without a fight. His cabin was more than wood and nails. It was a piece of his soul. He stepped outside and looked around the quiet neighborhood. His neighbors went about their mornings, unaware. Some had probably received the same letter. Or worse, already surrendered. The mountain air felt suddenly heavy, charged with silent tension. Eli's eyes caught movement in the trees. Was someone watching? His heart raced. He shut the door, locked it, and pulled the curtains. But sleep wouldn't come. That night, every creak of the cabin sounded like footsteps. Shadows seemed to flicker just beyond the windows. The peaceful retreat had turned into a cage. Outside, a distant engine roared. Maybe a patrol, maybe a demolition. Crew getting ready. Eli stared at the envelope on his kitchen table, the ticking clock marking his dwindling time. The battle for his cabin had begun. The next morning, Eli woke with a knot in his stomach tighter than ever. The 72-hour countdown loomed like a thundercloud over the mountains. He knew the clock was against him, but he refused to let panic take hold. The first step, find out exactly what the HOA was accusing him of, and whether anyone else had been targeted. He pulled on his boots and headed down the winding gravel road toward the neighboring cabins. The mountain community had always felt like a refuge, but now it felt like a cage tightening around him. At the first house, Eli knocked, the sound echoing in the still morning air. A middle-aged woman with wary eyes answered. Eli quickly introduced himself, careful not to sound desperate. "Did you get a notice from the HOA?" he asked. Her eyes darted around nervously. I did," she whispered. "But I don't want to talk about it. You don't want to mess with them." "Why? What's going on?" Eli pressed gently. She glanced over her shoulder, then leaned in. "Last year, old Mr. Tanner's cabin was condemned overnight. He fought, but the HOA made it vanish. Just like that. Some say he left town. Others, well, they say he disappeared." Eli swallowed hard. Rumors like this were easy to dismiss, but the fear in her voice was real. "Are there cameras around? People watching?" Eli asked. She nodded. "Since the new board took over, they've been everywhere. We're all scared. No one wants to be next." Unease settled deep in Eli's gut. This wasn't just about paperwork or bylaws. It felt like intimidation. He walked on, knocking door to door, but the answers were all the same. Hushed voices, nervous glances, and an unspoken agreement to stay silent. Some avoided him altogether. By afternoon, Eli found himself at the community center, a drab building that housed the HOA's small offices. From a distance, he spotted a pair of men in suits standing near the entrance, scanning the lot. They wore earpieces and carried themselves like security rather than administrators. A chill ran down Eli's spine. As he turned to leave, he noticed fresh surveillance cameras mounted on poles lining the roads near his cabin. The lenses gleamed menacingly in the fading sun, pointed directly at his property. "Big brother," Eli muttered under his breath. Back at the cabin, Eli's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Drop it, Eli. You don't know what you're up against." His hands trembled. Was the message a warning or a threat? That night, sleep was elusive. Every creak of the old cabin sounded like footsteps approaching. Shadows seemed to shift just beyond the windows. Eli double-checked locks and bolted doors. A sudden flash of headlights swept across the cabin's front yard. Heart pounding, Eli peered through the curtains. Two black SUVs idled on the roadside, their engines silent but ominous. Were they waiting for him to brake? Was this just the beginning? The next morning, Eli resolved he wouldn't back down. He began documenting everything, photographing the cameras, recording the SUVs, and carefully writing down every suspicious interaction. The tension in the air was suffocating, but Eli was more determined than ever to expose whatever dark forces were controlling the HOA. As he sat on his porch, laptop open, a sudden knock startled him. At the door stood a young man, face drawn and eyes wary. "I'm Lucas," he said quietly. "I've seen what they're doing. I want to help." Eli hesitated. Could he trust this stranger? Or was he another pawn in the HOA's game? The clock was ticking, and in this quiet mountain town, the shadows were growing longer. Eli barely slept that night. The presence of the two black SUVs outside his cabin weighed heavily on his mind. Were they watching him? Waiting for something? The crisp mountain air felt colder, the silence thicker. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret. Every rustling leaf, a warnings. Morning light filtered through the pine needles. As Eli met Lucas on the porch, the young man's eyes were sharp, alert, like someone used to reading danger in the smallest details. "They've been watching me too," Lucas admitted, pulling out a small notebook. "I work as a contractor in the neighborhood, fixing things the HOA orders done. But lately, they've been pushing harder. Demolitions, evictions, Threats. This isn't just about the rules anymore. Eli nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Time was running out. Just over 48 hours left. The demolition crew could show up at any moment, armed with bulldozers and legal warrants. They decided the first priority was gathering solid evidence to prove Eli's cabin was within all legal guidelines. If they could stop the demolition legally, maybe, just maybe, they could buy enough time to fight back. Lucas handed Eli a small handheld camera. "We'll record everything. Inspections, notices, even the surveillance cameras themselves. Transparency might be our only shield." As they ventured around the property, Eli's nerves tightened. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught glimpses of figures lurking just beyond tree lines, faces obscured by baseball caps and sunglasses. The black SUVs seemed to patrol the roads at irregular intervals, never quite leaving. At one point, a gruff voice called out from behind a thick cluster of evergreens, "You're making a mistake, Eli. This isn't a game." Eli spun around, heart hammering, but the man disappeared into the shadows before he could respond. The threat hung in the air. Back inside the cabin, Eli reviewed hours of footage, focusing on HOA notices and correspondence. The violations the HOA cited were vague at best. A faded fence here, an unauthorized structure there, but nothing that should justify demolition. The rules seemed selectively enforced. Late afternoon brought an unexpected surprise. Eli's phone buzzed with a cryptic text message. "Look deeper. The truth isn't in the rules. It's in the past." Puzzled and curious, Eli logged onto the HOA's website and found a hidden archive section he'd never noticed before. The files were old and poorly maintained. Meeting minutes from years ago, property records, and letters exchanged among board members. Scrolling through, Eli uncovered hints of a long-forgotten plan. A secret deal to clear the land for a luxury resort. Disguised as community improvements, several homeowners had been quietly pressured to sell or move. Some had left suddenly, never to be heard from again. The more Eli read, the clearer it became. His cabin was standing in the way of a massive development scheme, and the HOA was the tool being used to erase him. A sudden noise shattered the quiet. A window rattling violently, then a sharp crash. Someone was trying to break in. Eli grabbed his phone, heart pounding, and moved cautiously toward the sound. Outside, a heavy branch lay broken on the ground beneath a shattered window pane. His sanctuary was no longer safe. Suddenly, a voice came over the phone. "Lucas? Eli, I'm outside. I saw shadows moving near your workshop. I'm coming in." Minutes later, Lucas was inside, locking the door behind him. "We're not just fighting paper," Lucas said grimly. "They want you gone, and they're not afraid to get their hands dirty." Eli's hands trembled as he realized the stakes were far higher than he'd imagined. The 72-hour clock ticked down relentlessly, each second fueling a race, not just for a cabin, but for survival. Eli sat at his cluttered kitchen table, the dim light from his laptop screen casting long shadows on the walls of the cabin. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint tapping of keys, as he delved deeper into the HOA's digital archives. Each document he uncovered felt like peeling back a layer of a much darker secret. The files told a story Eli hadn't expected, one of greed, manipulation, and hidden agendas stretching back decades. Minutes turned into hours as he scrolled through dusty meeting minutes, old property deeds, and private emails leaked between board members. The evidence was damning: forged signatures, falsified inspection reports, and hush money payments to homeowners who'd mysteriously sold their properties at a fraction of their value. One document caught his eye: a confidential memo from 5 years ago discussing a clearance plan for several properties in the community, including his cabin's land. The plan was codenamed Project Timberfall, and its goal was chillingly straightforward: acquire targeted properties by any means necessary to make way for high-end commercial development. Eli's stomach churned. This wasn't just a bureaucratic power play. It was a calculated operation to seize control of the mountain's most valuable real estate. Using the HOA as a front, his mind raced back to the cryptic message. Look deeper. The truth isn't in the rules. It's in the past. He was beginning to understand just how deep the rot went. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, Eli grabbed his jacket and headed for the community center. Determined to access physical records, not yet digitized, the building loomed under the crimson sky, its windows reflecting the fading light like watchful eyes. Inside, the air was stale and cold. Eli slipped past the reception desk and found the filing room. A maze of dusty cabinets and yellowing folders. He rifled through files labeled confidential, legal disputes, and property transfers. Suddenly, a noise echoed from the hallway. Eli froze, heart pounding. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate. He ducked behind a filing cabinet. Just as a man in a dark suit entered the room, the stranger carried a thick folder and scanned the shelves carefully. Eli's breath caught. This was no random visitor. He held his breath as the man paused nearby. Then, after a tense moment, turned and left, his footsteps fading down the hall. Eli waited a few minutes, then returned to the files. He pulled out a folder stamped with the HOA's official seal and opened it. Inside were contracts between the HOA and a mysterious corporation called Evergreen Development, a company known for aggressive takeovers and controversial projects. The documents revealed that Evergreen had secretly funded the HOA's legal battles and enforcement actions in exchange for cleared land to build luxury resorts, shopping centers, and private estates. The realization hit Eli like a freight train. His beloved cabin was collateral damage in a corporate land grab. Back at his cabin, Eli shared the documents with Lucas, who listened with grim determination. "This changes everything," Lucas said. "It's not just a fight for your cabin. It's a fight for the whole community's future." Eli nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. They needed to act fast. But as night deepened, Eli's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden power outage. The cabin plunged into darkness, and the silence that followed was heavy with menace. From outside came the faint hum of an engine, then the unmistakable crunch of gravel under tires. Someone was here. Eli grabbed a flashlight and crept to the window, shining the beam into the night. Two figures stood near the edge of the property, their faces obscured by shadows. The flashlight flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed the cabin. Eli's pulse raced. The battle had only just begun. The cabin lay in complete darkness, the sudden blackout casting Eli and Lucas into a tense silence. The night outside seemed to close in, thick and suffocating. Eli's fingers fumbled for his phone, its weak glow barely piercing the shadows. The two shadowy figures were still there, unmoving, watching. Suddenly Eli's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You're meddling in things beyond your reach. Stop now." The words felt like a warning etched in ice. Lucas tightened his grip on the flashlight. "We can't back down. Not now." Eli swallowed hard, the weight of the threat sinking in. But something inside him ignited. If the HOA wanted a war, he would give them one. Over the next few hours, Eli and Lucas worked feverishly to build a digital fortress. They recorded every suspicious movement around the cabin, captured every aggressive act by the HOA's agents, and compiled documents exposing the secret dealings with Evergreen Development. Lucas was tech-savvy, encrypting their findings and preparing to share them with the wider community. Eli drafted a bold plan. They would live-stream the entire operation, showing the public how the HOA was abusing its power, threatening homeowners, and using intimidation to seize land. With trembling hands, Eli uploaded a teaser clip showing the demolition notice and footage of surveillance cameras pointed directly at his cabin. The clip quickly went viral within their mountain community and beyond. Comments flooded in from outraged neighbors, friends, and even local journalists. The HOA board members, caught off guard, scrambled to respond, but their denials rang hollow. Some homeowners began to speak out publicly, emboldened by Eli's courage, but the HOA wasn't done. Within 24 hours, Eli received a formal notice, increasing his fines exponentially, an attempt to force him out financially. The HOA claimed he had violated new emergency community guidelines, a rule that had mysteriously appeared overnight. The stakes had skyrocketed. Eli met with a local attorney recommended by Lucas. The lawyer examined the case and revealed a critical loophole in the HOA's bylaws, a rarely enforced clause that could be used to temporarily halt any demolition or eviction if the homeowner filed a formal dispute. Eli seized the opportunity immediately, filing the injunction to stop the demolition. It worked, for now. The demolition crew halted their advance, leaving Eli's cabin standing, but surrounded by an ominous silence. But the legal battle had only just begun. Behind the scenes, the HOA retaliated by quietly levying liens against Eli's property, threatening foreclosure if he didn't pay impossible fees. They hired aggressive lawyers to fight his injunction and pressure him into submission. Eli's finances were stretched thin, and the stress began to wear on him. Yet amid the chaos, a new wave of support emerged. Neighbors who had once been silent started organizing meetings, sharing stories of harassment and unexplained disappearances. The community began to unite. Eli's small rebellion was turning into a movement, but in the shadows, the HOA's board plotted their next move. Late one night, Eli found an anonymous letter slipped under his door. Inside was a copy of the HOA's latest meeting minutes, detailing plans to increase homeowners' dues dramatically. Not just a little increase. They intended to triple the dues, especially targeting those who dared to resist. It was a ruthless power play designed to crush dissent and fill the HOA's coffers. Eli's mind raced. If he could turn this against them, if he could use their own greed as leverage, a dangerous idea took root. This was no longer just about saving a cabin. It was about exposing corruption and reclaiming power. Eli wasn't just fighting to survive. He was ready to fight back. The countdown continued. But Eli's resolve burned. Brighter than ever, Eli sat in the dim light of his cabin's small study, staring at the letter that had slipped under his door. The HOA's plan was clear and merciless. Triple the dues for homeowners who defied the board, hitting their pockets where it hurt most. It was economic warfare disguised as policy, designed to isolate and crush anyone brave enough to resist. But Eli wasn't just any homeowner. He was a fighter, and he had an idea, a way to flip the script. The very greed fueling the HOA's campaign could be used against them. He began by quietly reaching out to the neighbors, who had started to find their voices. Over the next few days, small meetings were held in living rooms and on porches, each one filled with hushed conversations and nervous glances toward the looming threat of the HOA's wrath. Eli shared the leaked meeting minutes. The triple dues scheme wasn't just about increasing revenue. It was a weapon to silence opposition and force the community's reluctant compliance. If we all refuse to pay the inflated fees, they won't be able to enforce it, Eli explained, his voice steady despite the tension. If enough of us band together, the HOA will be financially crippled. Skepticism met his words. Fear of retaliation hung heavy, but Eli's resolve was contagious. Slowly, a plan took shape. A collective refusal to pay the new dues, paired with public exposure of the HOA's corruption. Meanwhile, Eli and Lucas continued documenting every move the HOA made, recording aggressive board meetings, capturing harassing phone calls, and gathering testimonies from homeowners who had been bullied into silence. With Lucas's help, Eli launched a social media campaign titled Save Our Cabins, aimed at drawing regional media attention to the community's plight. Videos went viral, forcing local news outlets to cover the story, and even sparking interest from consumer protection groups. Under mounting pressure, the HOA board's mask began to slip. Members bickered openly during meetings, some demanding a retreat from the triple dues plan, others threatening harsher crackdowns. But just as hope flickered, a new threat emerged. One morning, Eli found a large envelope on his porch. Inside was a formal demand for immediate payment. Over $10,000 in fines and fees accumulated overnight. The document was signed by the HOA's lawyer and carried a stark warning. Failure to pay would trigger foreclosure proceedings. Eli's heart sank. The HOA wasn't just playing dirty, they were aiming to wipe him out financially. But Eli refused to give in. Instead, he leveraged the threat. He filed a countersuit, accusing the HOA of extortion, illegal surveillance, and harassment. His attorney prepared a comprehensive legal challenge that exposed the HOA's repeated violations and shady dealings with Evergreen Development. As the legal battle escalated, Eli's community continued to rally behind him. Homeowners who had long kept their heads down began speaking at public hearings and posting their own stories online. The collective pressure was palpable. The HOA's aggressive tactics no longer felt like isolated attacks, but the unraveling of a corrupt system. One evening, as Eli sat reviewing documents, a knock came at the door. He opened it to find the HOA board president, a stern woman who had spearheaded the demolition orders, standing on his porch, face tight with forced calm. "We need to talk," she said. Eli hesitated, wary but curious. "Maybe there's a way to resolve this," she added quietly. "Before it gets worse for everyone." The line between enemy and ally blurred. Eli realized that the fight wasn't just about a cabin. It was a battle for the soul of their community, and he was ready for whatever came next. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke from a neighbor's fire. Eli stood on his porch, the HOA board president's words lingering in the chill. She wanted to talk. Was this a truce or a trap? Her name was Margaret, and as she stepped onto the porch, Eli noticed the faint tremor in her voice, an uncharacteristic vulnerability beneath the stern facade. "I didn't come here to threaten," she said, folding her arms. "I'm tired of the fighting. The board's under pressure from Evergreen Development. They're pushing for results, and fast." Eli's mind raced. Could she be a crack in the armor? Or just another puppet? "What are you proposing?" he asked cautiously. Margaret sighed. "A compromise. If you and your neighbors agree to drop the legal battles and pay the dues, albeit at a lower increase, we can halt the demolitions and stop the liens. Evergreen wants this resolved quietly." Eli frowned. So you're asking us to give in? Not give in, she replied sharply. Negotiate. There's more at stake than just your cabin. The whole community could be destroyed if this escalates. Lucas, who had been quietly watching, stepped forward. What guarantee do we have? How do we know this isn't just a stall? Margaret looked him in the eye. You don't, but right. Now, it's the best shot at saving what's left. If you refuse, the board will escalate. Eli's stomach twisted. The offer was tempting, but fraught with risk. Could he trust the very people who had orchestrated the destruction? That night, Eli and Lucas pored over the options. The community's voices weighed heavily on him. The neighbors who'd rallied. The stories of losses and fears. They decided to meet the next day at the town hall, inviting Margaret and the HOA board to an open forum. The hall buzzed with tension. As homeowners packed the seats, some wary, others hopeful, Margaret took the podium first, outlining the board's proposal. Lower dues, increase, a temporary freeze on demolitions, and a promise to revisit the development plans with community input. Then Eli spoke, his voice firm but measured. He laid out the evidence they'd uncovered, the secret deals, the intimidation tactics, the power plays designed to strip homeowners of their rights. The room buzzed with murmurs and gasps. I'm not here to destroy the community, Eli said. I want to protect it from corruption and greed. If we work together, we can rebuild trust. But that means transparency and respect for every homeowner's voice. Margaret nodded slowly. I agree on transparency. Let's form a committee with equal representation from the board and homeowners. Let's put an end to the secrecy. For a moment, it seemed the battle might be ending. But then, from the back of the room, a sharp voice cut through the fragile calm. No deal. It was one of the HOA's senior enforcers, a man named Griggs, known for his ruthless tactics. These negotiations are a waste of time. The board should finish what it started. The room erupted into chaos. Shouts filled the air. The fragile truce shattered. Eli felt the weight of the moment. Trust was a luxury, and the real fight was far from over. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Margaret pulled Eli aside. I want to help, she whispered, but you need to be careful. Not everyone on the board shares my views. Griggs is dangerous. Eli's eyes narrowed. The real enemy wasn't just the HOA. It was the hidden war within it. The 72-hour deadline loomed closer. The cabin's fate and the community's future hung in the balance. The sun rose over the mountain neighborhood, casting long shadows across the quiet streets. Eli stood outside his cabin, the weight of the past days pressing heavily on him. The 72-hour ultimatum still ticked away, but the battle lines had shifted. This was no longer just about survival. It was about exposing the truth and reclaiming their community's soul. Margaret's warning echoed in his mind. Not everyone on the HOA board wanted peace. Griggs, the ruthless enforcer, had made that clear. And tonight, Eli was certain the final move would come. As dusk settled, Eli and Lucas set up hidden cameras around the property, preparing to livestream any attempt to demolish the cabin. The community had rallied online, thousands watching, waiting. Then just after midnight, headlights flooded the driveway. Bulldozers and trucks rolled in, crews shouting orders. But before they could move, Eli's live stream kicked in, broadcasting to the world. Suddenly sirens blared. Local law enforcement had arrived, tipped off by a flood of concerned calls. They halted the demolition crew, demanding proper legal documentation. Griggs stormed up, furious. This is an illegal blockade. You're interfering with lawful orders. But the officers weren't convinced. The injunction Eli filed earlier, combined with the evidence of harassment and forged documents, forced a pause. Griggs barked orders, but found himself overruled. Amid the chaos, Margaret appeared, walking steadily through the crowd. She had come with a proposal, one final attempt at negotiation to save the community from ruin. Eli met her gaze, wary but hopeful. "We can end this tonight," she said. "If the board agrees to a full investigation, and if Evergreen Development pulls out, we can rebuild trust." The crowd murmured. Tension thick in the air. Griggs's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, Margaret." But it was too late. A sudden revelation stunned everyone. A whistleblower from inside the HOA stepped forward. One of the board members secretly opposed to Evergreen's plans. They handed over damning evidence, emails, bank statements, proof of illegal payments. The tide turned. With public scrutiny crushing the corrupt board, the HOA's control began to crumble. Over the following days, meetings were held with county officials, homeowners, and independent investigators. The triple dues plan was scrapped. Lawsuits were filed against the HOA and Evergreen Development. Eli's cabin was safe. But more than that, a new community spirit was born. One built on transparency, accountability, and shared purpose. Standing on his porch, Eli looked out over the forested hills, breathing in the clean mountain air. The fight had tested him in ways he never expected. He had faced intimidation, betrayal, and fear, and emerged stronger. His cabin was more than a home. It was a symbol that standing up to corruption, no matter how powerful, was possible, and that sometimes when the odds are against you, turning the tables can change everything.